Yeah. Why do you think there's so much disagreement between people with different religions? Is it like with the tall poppy syndrome, people are thinking that, their religion is better in a sense? Why do you think there's so much like hate towards religions, even though a lot of these religions are very similar and they all tend to almost preach the same thing about being a good person, taking care of your neighbors. But then when it comes to religion, a specific one, there happens to be a lot of violence, years and years of, there's been a violence between religions forever. But yet each of these religions tell you to, take care of people, help them out, be a good person. But yeah, it's almost like the opposite is happening, and it has been happening for thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. And that is the supreme question, because here you are, Christianity, Jews and Muslims all want the one particular area, and they all came from this area, and they have so many similarities. But it's, once again, who's right? And I think, and you can't be, it's very hard religiously to be better than somebody else. You have to have more faith in God, and that's not very ostensible. So you cut each other down. So it's very prominent in the religions. And so for me, when, as I was talking about writing, all my writing and thinking now, unfortunately, I've trained myself to think of the tall poppy syndrome. So I see the world through the tall poppy syndrome. And so going to Israel and Jerusalem, I saw the tall poppy syndrome everywhere that I went.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned envy a lot as well. Do you think there's like good envy and bad envy? Because I feel like you could argue for both sides that some envy can be good, because it'll, in a sense, motivate you to attain something that you want without necessarily, hurting another person. Sometimes maybe envy could be a good motivator in a sense, as long as you're not hurting somebody. So is there a good and a bad envy in your opinion, or is there just, you're envious, which means it's always for a bad cause with bad intentions?
Well, unfortunately, I grew up Catholic, and that's why they're called the seven deadly sins. They look negatively at it, and envy was bad. But Aristotle divided good and bad envy back 400 BC, for example. And the psychologists now, they don't discriminate. They just say an emotion's at a functional state. They don't apply negative and positive. When I do all my writing, I talk about all the emotions are positive and negative. So good envy is just, you hit the nail right on the head. Good envy is emulation. I want to be like Michael Jordan. And so in order to improve yourself, you need tall poppies. Tall poppies are extremely important part of any society. And, who's my favorite tall poppy in America? It's Elon Musk. Why? Because I think Elon Musk is one of the most important figures in my lifetime right now. I think he's just a phenomenal person. I don't know about person, but the things that he's done. And so I didn't know it. I had good habits because of my parents. I mentioned my father was very strict. He was World War II vet and 4 years in the military. So of course and the military drives itself by bullying. The internet drives itself by envy. A little difference between the two organizations, but anywhere you have an organization, you're going to have either one or both of those things. In your hierarchy in an organization, you're moving up the next rungs, and it's going to be bullying or tall poppy syndrome, trying to prevent the others from getting the position you want. So the good envy, I didn't even realize that, when I was in high school, I stayed with friends that were smarter than I was. In college, I roomed with guys smarter than I was when I was in medical school. The two guys I roomed with were both in the top 5 of the class, and I was like the bottom 5 of the class. So I didn't know it, but I was using good envy when as I mentioned, I was at USC. I was at a very premier rehabilitation center, so I wanted to go practice medicine where medicine was good quality. In my private practice, I was with the president of the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgery. So I didn't know what I was doing actually until I studied the tall poppy syndrome. But I was subconsciously, because of my family's guidance, subtle guidance, was comparing myself to good people and trying to emulate the good people. So in my life, how did I do what I did? I emulated good people. And that's not the way most people do things. Most people covet things and use the negative emotion, envy as the emotion, and they cut people down. So the next emotion is anger. And anger, if you become angry, angry makes you become focused. So if you don't lash out, let's say you're a ball player, a basketball player, and somebody drives around you. The good ball player would say, wow, that guy's fast. He's got good legs. So you're going to start doing drills to do your footwork and to try and improve yourself so that you can move in front of that player so that he can't drive around you. Whereas the anger person, the next thing he does is sticks his leg out and trips him or elbows him or does something negative. So all emotions have good, and as I mentioned, neighborhood pride. Neighborhood pride is actually good as long as it doesn't get too excessive. If you're in a neighborhood of $1 million homes, you don't want somebody coming in and building a $10 million home. That's a little bit over the top. But if somebody fixes their yard up or maybe goes green and takes all the grass out and does something for the environment, that's good envy. And that's what drives society. And that's why I think envy is so important, because our envy is always on. I mean, you may have more of a rush with love, but love is not always on. Envy is always on. And that brings me to another slight bone of contention, which is good for you and your listeners. People use jealousy and envy interchangeably, and the two are completely different. Envy is frequently involved with jealousy, but envy is coveting something that someone else has. Either the person, their brains, their looks, their physique, what they own. Whereas jealousy is you have something and you're losing it. So it's just opposite. You have the coveted thing. There's a third person involved. Jealousy involves 3 people, which is the easy way to remember it. Somebody is taking something that you have, which is completely opposite the envy, which is coveting something you don't have. So you may be envious of the person that's taking something, but maybe they're funnier than you are, so your wife is drawn to them, for example. So they still may have something that you have, but the difference, and it's a huge difference, and most people don't recognize it. I was just reading on the plane going to Israel a best-selling book by a very prominent author, and he used jealousy almost inappropriately every time he used the term, which should have been envy. So even writers don't get it right all the time.
So you're saying that envy is wanting something you don't have, but jealousy is taking something you don't have?
Jealousy is losing something you already have. So think of wife. If somebody's taking your wife, you're jealous because she's attracted to somebody else. So you're losing something that you have. whereas envy's coveting something you don't have. So there's a huge difference, and one involves 3 people and the other is just 2 people. So that's the best way to remember it.
Yeah, it all comes down to that emotional intelligence that you mentioned a little bit ago. You need to be emotionally intelligent because as people, we can't always pick what feelings we're going to feel at that time. We have to control the feelings that we feel at that time. You can't just say, I'm gonna be sad now. I'll be happy now. Things just come. But being emotionally intelligent is being able to control those emotions. Like you mentioned with anger. You could be angry, and it's okay to feel angry, but it's not okay to hit somebody because you feel angry. It's okay to be upset, but you have to be able to control that feeling because anger is just a normal part of life. Jealousy, you could say, is also a normal part of life, but you have to learn to control that jealousy because we're all going to feel those things. We all just can't always control those things.
Yeah, that's why I think the book is important because it reestablishes emotions in your life and understanding them. And in medicine, we say you can't diagnose it if you don't know it. So that's why it takes so long to become trained in medicine, is because in essence, you have to try and know everything. And that doesn't come overnight. So I'm giving you a shortcut on how to understand your emotional makeup. And those emotions that I mentioned are the most common emotions I see in society daily. And who's at fault and who's right and that's the whole problem with our environmentalism that's going on now. I mean, is it really right to have EVs? Do they really save on the environment when you take batteries and everything that goes into the mining to do it and everything? So, the Black Lives Matter movement, I think, might have been a good movement, but the conclusion of defunding the police was not a good idea to my mind. So the whole idea with this is to understand the emotional makeup of the parties that you're looking at and the emotional makeup of yourself. As I say, my wife knew exactly she knew me, so she knew how I was going to behave, and she kept me from acting out, which is what you want to do when you're angry. So it's identifying these basic emotions and understanding them, and then you understand your place in society and what role you're playing. I mean, these so-called Karens of the world, if you're familiar with them, are emotions and what they call righteous indignation, and they think they're right. It's kind of like us talking about their various religions, and that the one religion thinking they're right and the other religion is wrong. And then through self-righteousness or justification, they feel that the other deserves to be cut down so that they can't make them change their mind and become to the correct side. So I'll just cut them down and then maybe they'll figure it out. But that's our problems. Our problem in society, one of the main problems is, when you talk about medicine, and, I spent my 2 years in the Army, so I was 35 before I was done with all my training and obligations. And that's delayed gratification, to think that you're going to give up 15 years of your life before you actually even start to do your thing. So that's why I would have, especially I'm 79 now, so I'm an old guy and I think very differently than I did back then. But, my years are numbered now and my good years are really numbered. So I want to live life to the fullest. But back then I could offer up a few years, but now I don't want to offer anything up. But unfortunately, society doesn't want to offer anything up either. They want immediacy, and the internet gives them immediacy. As soon as you're pissed off about something, you can go to your echo chamber on the internet and find somebody that agrees with you and make you feel better. In the meantime, that's probably the wrong thing you should be doing. You should be having an open mind and going to the other box and seeing maybe they have a good idea like my wife did, taking time off and enjoying each other and living and enjoying the city that I had grown to hate a lot.
Yeah, 100%. I really agree with that, with the whole echo chamber statement, because sometimes people are stuck doing the same thing over and over again. And the best solution, or the best place they can look for a solution, is somebody that doesn't offer them the solution that they want to hear. It's offering a solution that you didn't think about, because like you said, the echo chamber, you go to speak to your friends or your peers or whatever, and you just bounce back the same ideas over and over and over again. And it's like, how are things going to change if you're just doing the same thing and repeating the same thing and you're hearing the same thing over and over again? How are you going to find like a solution if you're just doing the same thing over and over and over again? But people don't want to, they don't want that. They just want to, almost in a sense, have somebody say, yeah, you're right, that person was in the wrong, without them saying, hey, maybe you're in the wrong, maybe you should maybe change up your thing. It's always easier to point a finger at somebody else and tell them, hey, they're wrong, we're right, because look at all of us agreeing. And then you get stuck in this idea, this point of view, where then you think you're always right, because everyone that you speak to has the same idea, same vision, and you're never ever progressing, or you're never thinking outside the box, because everyone's always like a yes man in a sense.
No, that's the nail on the head. And the cable news and the streaming and the internet gives you that opportunity now. So the easiest thing always is to cut somebody down, not to improve yourself. So that's why this is just the signs of our time right now, that it's just too easy to do it. That's why I thought my book was so timely, was because America really is cutting down each other more at a more rapid rate than, say, 50 years ago. And as I mentioned, it's mostly because of media and the internet and the immediacy of everything. And everybody wants a result right away. If you don't agree with me, I'll just cut you down. So we're stuck, and we need to take 5. That's how you control anger, right? So anger is not as bad as everybody thinks. Because of the news and everything, it looks worse. But anger only results in violence about 10% of the time. It doesn't always follow through. And my favorite saying is, the next step is actually, the third step is revenge, which is what I would have done if it hadn't been for my wife. And revenge, there's a saying, if you seek revenge, dig 2 graves. And that means one for the person you're trying to cut down and the others for you, because you're going to spend so much negative energy to win. And that person, if he's an idiot, you're going to have to be a bigger idiot than that idiot is in order to cut him down. So in the end, you're going to put so much negative energy into that person, which is kind of Will Smith. I mean, it cost him a lot to do something dumb. So you need to, that's what anger management is about. This first thing, just step back and look at the situation. So all the emotions are like it. And if you understand the tall poppy syndrome, you'll be a better person.